Alright, we're just gonna roll with this and we're just gonna record because every freaking time I go to do this, the settings for the audio get weird. And I was just about to be able to use my mic because the webcam just didn't want to work. It made me sound like Mickey Mouse. Then I got this to work, but there's this weird popping noise going on because even though the computer has audio input, especially for microphones, it doesn't feel like doing it. It just doesn't because Windows updates, which are not upgrades or maintenance. It's just, screw you, buy a new PC. Yeah, screw off. Anyway, where was I? So basically, there are certain channels certain creators that I like. I don't care if they're famous, popular, have amazing analytics. It's who are they? What are they doing and why? And does it mean something? Is it, I don't know. What am I getting out of it? I find that I have a tendency to have a bias if I know the person, which doesn't always mean that I like their content, or if there's something unique about this person that I find like extremely valuable. And so this channel is The Subtle Realms by Heather, and she only has like 108 views. And I have a tendency, because I'm a philosopher, to watch and rewatch because I want to digest. Because when someone has like actual depth and actual like ideals and thoughts and so on, I appreciate that. Probably because nobody, for the most part, tends to appreciate it when I do it. So when I see it in someone else, I'm like, yes, thank you, more of this, please. At some point, though, there are people who have learned to play the game, and it's about, like, marketing and whatever, and I don't want to trash any of that. Like, for example, so Third Eye drops. Do I have a video here? There's a lot of AI slop. I've been looking into AI slop lately. Where is it? I'm also rethinking if I want to keep all of this in dark mode and put it into white mode again. I don't know. Third Eye drops. So, for some reason, my friend Michelle doesn't like Michael Phillip. I don't know why. I think his content is so good. He's the type that I would gravitate to. The type that, like, he'll even take on topics I'm not interested in, or I'm opposed to, or I'm like, ew, but then, like, he'll take it on, and I'm like, oh, I changed my mind. I like his content, and I have a tendency to watch and rewatch his videos and certain parts of the videos many times over, an average of at least 3 times, oftentimes all the way through, or I'll rewatch certain parts and I'll back it up and I'll watch it again, because I really want to, like, digest and think, because that's the kind of person I am. It's a philosopher thing. I'm a thinking, thoughtful person. And what I also like about Michael Phillip is he has knowledge of things like qualia, the arts, culture. Like, he has tastes, okay? He's not one of those normies who's in the shallows and just looks at art and creative things and go, oh, those artists are crazy and silly and stupid, and their idea of whatever the concept of an artist is like that scene in, what was that movie? What the bleep do we know? That's another topic I could go into. Where the girl that's the artist character is just running around flinging paint around, dancing like a weirdo. Because, that's the only thing that an artist could possibly be and do. That, and people who, like, their concept of an artist is like somebody in a French beret with a paint palette who does paintings, and that's their only concept of art. But yet somehow also think that you put some prompts into an AI and now you're making art. Shut up. Anyway, so Heather, this is like a hour video. She put so much thought into this. She's very much what a true philosopher was in ancient times, and very much also like a mystic and a sage. And she's super interesting to me. Like, I just love all the things she does. She's also an artist herself. Weird coinky dink. And so she had all these like amazing things that she was just on this very interesting stream of consciousness, track. And you can tell that she's put so much thought into this and and she's still working on it. And her work this whole year is so good. I couldn't even write a comment worthy of anything that she's talking about, because I myself have, and this is something I worked on my entire freaking life. So, like the video itself is, like, mind at large. It even says it, like, right here. Mind at large. I have freaking notes, right? Because, like, this is the real, like, the meat, the core. And there's so many different ways to, like, take on, like, any of these topics. And this is, like, the real value of having people from different perspectives, as well as people who are kind of noticing something similar but having a different take, or maybe even having, like, a similar thought. This is another thing. Like, you don't necessarily need to be entirely copacetic with somebody to appreciate them. There's a whole concept of, like, complementary colors that are, like, opposite colors, but they work well together, right? And this is the thing that I so appreciate about Heather and her work. And she has been through, like, bad stuff. Totally relatable, okay? Anyway, so she's talking about, like, it's, like, really awesome. The things that, like, I didn't know that she was interested in, but I also secretly was, like, interested in. So she's talking about this, are we calling it a podcast or a show? And it's called New Thinking Aloud with Mishlove. And, I do actually watch a number of those. It has this very, like, old school, like, TV show look, right? Like, or public television or something like that. And so she was talking about, like, that stuff reminds me of, like, back in the day, because there's a lot of this stuff that was, like, reminding me of things in my past when I was younger. When I really, like, I had gone through the bullshit of going to college, sticking to it, don't be a quitter, get that degree, because, in the Clinton era, everyone's like, you need to have a degree or to get somewhere in life because education is good for you, etc. But their reasoning is jobs and salary, which George W. Bush election happened with Gore, and you can go into that if you want. And a lot of things just outsourcing happened, and whatever. So back then, which is a result of as to why I'm literally here in this chair at this desk in this specific building right now, and I'm still here. Okay, I used to watch, there was this channel, and this was like when I got pregnant, there was this channel on cable TV called the Wisdom Channel, and not all the content was, like, very polished or well produced. Like, a lot of times the image and the lighting of the stuff was bad, or it was, like, recordings from, like, a seminar or a talk or whatever by some intellectual, like, back then when New Age actually was more coherent, because it was people who liked science and weren't science deniers, had a sort of hippie-ish vibe, but also corporate, kind of. Like, you had to work in corporate, whatever, to live. People who had, functioning brains, and they were coherent and had an education or whatever. But they weren't, like, evolution deniers or science deniers. This was what New Age was in, like, Y2K, okay, or the late 90s. So it was more interesting. Right? And it was like new ideas and new kinds of science and new approaches to things and whatever, which by the Bush era just became like this cult of personality, and it became greed driven and all kinds of ideas which sounded good at first that were repurposed into bad things, and I could go on and on about that. But I would watch the Wisdom Channel, and I remember just, like, vibing with this, thinking, like, wow, this is great. This is like these are interesting ideas, these are concepts, these are perspectives. And it's funny how, like, certain people on there who were not that famous yet. Maybe they had a bestseller book, or maybe they had been on Oprah, or eventually went on Oprah. Some of them have just turned out to be a POS, a piece of you-know-what. And that's pretty sad. But this was kind of the thing I actually liked about Mishlev's stuff, was that it reminded me of when I was younger and I was listening to Mishlev. And so what, I have some stuff here, and it says a larger pre-existing mind underlying reality consciousness beings, Nous. And then she goes into like Upanishads, Atman versus Brahman. And this is one of these things. This is one of these things. I could just, this topic, and I mean this goes into, and then right after that it goes into monad. Now I wrote here absolute zero. Absolute zero, which is one of those subjects, topics, concepts that I have spent so much time pondering. This is what philosophers do. Just pondering the concept of absolute zero, because it's so, it's such an interesting thing. It's such a conundrum. If you don't know what absolute zero is, basic concept is the absolute coldest temperature in physical 3D reality that things could possibly ever reach, at a point where this absolute zero, matter and the electrons and all the other subatomic particles stop moving. That is absolute zero. Okay? The thing is, when it comes to absolute zero, we absolutely cannot ever reach it. We can only get to a fraction of a decimal point of a whatever, and we can never actually achieve absolute zero. Even though it exists, even though we can prove that it's there in the math, it's impossible to actually reach. There was this show, this was back when I still had cable TV. There was this 2-part series on, this is back when Discovery Channel actually was good. Either it was Discovery Channel or one of their affiliates, like the Learning Channel or the Science Channel, something like that. And I sat on that sofa, which you can't see. And my daughter was, I think she was born. And my husband, he comes home from work or whatever. And I'm just like, no, yeah, my daughter was home. She's like a toddler or whatever. And they're making noise. And I'm like, can you be quiet? I want to hear this. And then he's getting mad at me, oh, why you gotta be like that? We're just, having family time or whatever. And I'm like, but this is about absolute zero. And they're just like, what? Huh? So what? I mean, so what? Oh, but it's one of those things that I would just sit there, whether I was in the shower, whether I was on a commute, when I was in the pool, when I was taking a walk, contemplating just that. But even not just that, absolute zero, since I'm already on this tangent, if you think of the number line, think of the number line where you have 0, and then you have 1, and then you have 2, 3, 4, right? And these are plus, right? So then we have 0, but then we have negative. Right? Or hold on. This, to me, and it just keeps going and going and going and going, right? This, to me, is just one of those things that I would just ponder and ponder, and most especially because when it comes to 0, there's all this space in between here, in just the concept of this is 0 and this is 1. But then you might have 0.5. And then you can just half it, and then half that, and then half that, and half that, and half that, and you'd still have this infinitum, right? Infinity, infinitum, ad infinitum, right? At some point, even though knowing that this exists, this whole space in between there, what makes this go from 0 to 1 or 1 to nothing? This is something I could just think and think and think and ponder just this concept alone. This concept alone. And never be done. Ever. So, then, and I mean, like, all this stuff very much harkens back to that time when I was much younger, and I had come across these conundrums. Back when search engines were very different, most people didn't, like, I don't even think Google was really a thing. Most people used, like, Yahoo, and there were other competitive ones. And, was it like Ask Jeeves? What was the one? Lycos and Webcrawler, which still exists, and other ones. But I think mostly I used Yahoo back then. I remember looking up, and I need to go through my CD-ROMs to find it. I found all these recordings of these lectures of this guy. I don't know who it was. It was I think it was a Scottish guy. And I found it because I was looking up, like, consciousness, right? And so Heather has, like, she's kind of veered into her own concept of consciousness, which is different than I would, a different route that I would go. She went to this, like, sort of awareness and consciousness, and her framework, her model of viewing it. Don't know that I would go that route, but I still, like, I'm very Socratic, and I don't actually definitively know a lot of things. I have a tendency to defer to my own framework of these things, but that doesn't mean I'm rigidly stuck into it. And so she went into concepts of, like, spirit, right? And this is a word, this is the philosopher in me. This is me on the quote-unquote journey, or the quote-unquote path of tracing back the origins of stuff. And this gets to the root, well, because she brought up monad. Monad was this thing at that exact time period. I already just mentioned, like, the absolute zero, like this Bush era, my early 20s. And I was, just like I mentioned that Scottish guy, this was when, podcasts were like this new thing, and it was because of Apple Computers, which Apple Computers was a hated brand, and then it was rebranding and restructuring and whatever. That's funny because that was like Steve Jobs, which many people now idolize. But because I'm biased and I'm friends with David Biedney, the late David Biedney, he had a whole tiff with Jobs, and that's a whole thing. So it's really interesting to be aware of these things from various perspectives as well, even looking back, right? And so podcasts were like this new kind of a thing, and this was like the MySpace days, if you can remember that, because I do. And they had a thing in the blog there where you could put the URL to the podcast. Oh, by the way, podcasts today mean a completely different thing than what it did back then. Usually, but not always, usually podcasts originally were audio. They could be video, but they were audio. And it was almost entirely done, almost exclusively through iTunes. And this is before things like RSS feeds or feeds, etc. Another one was like, XML. There was another kind of XML, just to throw this in there. Before that was a kind of 3D plugin thingy for 3D Studio Max. Just thought I'd throw that in there. And I was typing in words to try and find certain kinds of topics, because when I was younger I was more of like a new age person or a so-called spiritual person, and to me I felt like that was like the most important thing. And if you looked into my numerology, my main number is 7, and the rest of the numbers and these are the numbers that come up over and over again: 7, 8, and 9, over and over. So if you know anything about numerology, that there's that framework if you want to look at it from that. And then of course there's my astrological chart if you want to look at it from that perspective. That's another thing. And so I had this belief bias that the only most important thing was so-called spirituality. And as time went on, I started to realize the thing that because these words mean like 9,000 different things to any number of people, even in the same church or building or group, that at some point, a lot of it is just abstract, that you don't even have a real consensus or real understanding of what any of these concepts even mean, and that there goes into the philosophy again. So I realized what I actually cared about was ethics, which that's another conundrum because there's different styles of ethics. And if you look up ethics, there's several of them. I really absolutely resent and detest the fact that Stoicism is very popular right now, and for all of the wrong reasons. I feel like people who gravitate to Stoicism, I think it says a lot about the problems with your personality and your mindset and your impulse control problems. And this is kind of the problem with religions before, who, especially like Protestants and Puritans, absolutely loved Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius. And this is the problem. You probably never actually read Marcus Aurelius. If I did an entire breakdown of even just an audiobook, which would take hours, days, many parts, and I showed you what you're not paying attention to. Another one is The Art of War. These texts will have certain nuggets of stuff that will resonate with people, and they'll go, see how wise this person is? And this is both Marcus Aurelius and The Art of War. I forgot that guy's name at the second. But when you get actually further into these things and you start to really analyze the subtext of what this person is saying, their motive, and why they're saying these things, it's absolutely vile, revolting, and disgusting. And I say that as someone who completely does understand it. I understand literature. I understand not just context, because most people, only if they have a concept of this sort of how to approach things, they'll go context, in context, out of context. Okay, what's the context of this and that? Oh, you don't know because you don't understand what context means. The thing is, then there's subtext. Subtext explains a lot of people's motives, including by what they're not saying and what they're not doing versus what they're saying and their actions. It implies, it doesn't just imply, it proves their motives, what their real values are, what they really love, what they really think, how they really feel, right? I don't even get to stay on. I don't even think I can get through all of this. There's 2 pages of stuff here. And I don't think I'll be able to even get through half, because I haven't even done the monad thing. The monad. What is the monad? I challenge anyone who's watching this. If you even think you understand what monad is and monad means, you really don't. And this is the Socratic philosopher in me. This is the origin of logic, the origin of what is truth, what is rational thought, how do you know, epistemology. And if you still have not ever read Plato's book, The Defense of Socrates, or the Apologia or Apology of Socrates, it's a short book. Fucking read it. There's audiobooks, okay? You're watching this, pause it, and then you'd understand what I'm talking about. Here we go. I could do this over and 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 repeat myself, and people will not fucking learn a thing. I can't make you learn it. This isn't this instant gratification thing. You gotta get over it and actually fucking think. Yeah, you might actually have to do that. You might actually have to digest stuff. And I'm not mad at Heather at all. I love Heather. Okay. So where is it? Chris and more philosophy. I think it's in Honolulu. And it's slow as hell. Let's see, it's, was it? Honolulu, right? That's slow as hell. Because of course, here we go. I wrote her name wrong, that's why. You can skip, here we go. Here's the videos. It's the fact that I have to tell this to like adults, people who think they know, but do you really? See, you don't understand. You don't know that origin story of Socrates. You don't understand that origin story of Plato. And like I said, with third eye drops, he waxes lyrical and poetic and nostalgic for Platonism, which is from Plato. There's Platonism and Neoplatonism, okay? So when he's talking, I'm like, oh my God, he's speaking my language. Here we go. You can skip this. It's kind of dated. I mean, you could for I don't know, historical purposes, just see where she's coming from. What I like about her Philosophy 101 course, which I don't even think you need to do all of it. Okay, you can if you want to. She talks about here inadequate answers, right? Best possible answers, right? This is free to watch, free education, extremely valuable. The answers to all of your problems are here, because when you learn it, when you take it in, you will never be able to be suckered again, or if you have, you can understand why. They do not teach this anymore. This is free. You don't have to pay for it. This is a real course, real education that once you take it in is a part of you forever. I could literally name so many people by name that I have recommended this to, and they never even bothered. That is very sad. Very sad. And I will always say this. Another one is permaculture. Permaculture. It only takes a few hours. Think of it this way. If you had tried let's say, if you had done this video and gone all the way to just here, right? Without even getting to Aquinas, because this is getting into like German philosophers and Renaissance or whatever. You just went to the sophist relativism. If you just went to there, let's say you did this, how many videos is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 days ago. 10 days ago, you took less than an hour, or about an hour or whatever, and digested each one, right? Mind you, each lesson, when she gives it to her students, they have a week to digest this and like reflect on it or whatever. 10 days ago, or let's say you spread it out, or beginning of this month, and you took your time with each one and reflected on it and whatever, you would know what this is. It would be a part of you, and you'd be much smarter, much more clever, much better, and you could help many other people also anybody can do this. Anybody can do this. And this is kind of the problem with, like, because I downloaded all kinds of lectures from like Oxford and whatever, I remember I downloaded, I don't know if it was podcast form or if it was just like downloading the audio lectures from Oxford. The chick who was in charge of Oxford philosophy department. And she's talking about how hard it is and she's not worthy enough to take on like the meaning of life and what, and because of that shit, I was afraid to do it. Because she put that in my head. And I will say that a lot of problems with a lot of philosophy classes today, within like the first week or two, or even like in a philosophy 101, I really don't think you should go into Rene Descartes. This is kind of another problem with philosophy, is that so much of it, because of ever since Rene Descartes, it just kind of went into this Cartesian thing, and then it became just too hard for everybody. Another one is Aristotle's style. I don't think that should ever be a part of coursework in the first in 101 ever. That is too hard, too much, too sudden for a person who is newly learning these things ever. You should stick with Socratic logic, Socrates, and Plato. And then, no, she even throws in like certain like mystical type, like, so she has like the Buddha, she'll bring in Christianity. A lot of these things are kind of dated also. Like there's stuff where she talks about morals versus ethics. As a much more well-read person at this time in my life, I disagree with what she's saying because I've done the work. Because I've digested these things. I've put the thought, I've put the work into it. Okay? So here we go, back to Monad. The story of the Monad, because I don't even know if I'll be able to even get through all of this. I mean, like she's just talking about like Sufi stuff, which also nobody else in the spaces that we hang around and ever talk about, because heaven forfend you should talk about somebody who was Islamic. Oh no. Or from Persia, which today is where? Iran. Oh no. Because everything has to be Judeo-Christian. Everything has to be Judeo-Christian. Maybe it's like, you know, the Book of the Dead from the Egyptians and the Tibetans, and maybe a few sprinklings of, I don't know, Buddhism or some Hindu concept that they don't even understand, and only going off of like the translation of this guy who repeated that guy 7 degrees later in English. They don't understand. Whatever. I'm sorry if I come off like a jerk or I'm snob or whatever, but like I'm so fed up. And by the way, I'm not mad at Heather. Heather I find super exciting, super interesting. She also gets into things like mind versus brain, but monad. I downloaded this podcast because I was very much interested in topics such as metaphysics, and metaphysics, spirituality, whatever. And I remember just vibing out. I would just sit there all day, especially when I was pregnant, because I couldn't really do anything. Just watching like the Wisdom Channel. That is not a good pose. That's offensive. Anyway, there we go. That's better. Watching the Wisdom Channel, which was a fantastic channel, and then it got shut down. I don't even know if you can even find anything. What am I doing? What am I doing? Inappropriate. So I'm listening to this guy, and I think this was getting into like either Kabbalah or Gnosticism, which, by the way, Kabbalah is a ripoff of Hermeticism. I know that, I understand that today, but back, because like Madonna was like promoting these like Kabbalah or whatever, it was like, I think, was that in the 90s or the 2000s? Everybody was all like gushing over it. I just found it, what I didn't like about Kabbalah was the price tag. Just saying, oh no, she's racist, she's just stereotyping, she's blah 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 blah. The price tag. I'm not kidding. Like, it wasn't free. It wasn't free. And there were certain things about it that, I mean, I was like, yeah, I can't do this or that, and the economy crashed. It was a Bush era. We could go on and on about that, and it was not free. It was not free at all. And there was just certain things that turned me off about it. Really turned me off about it. So I know people probably be like, oh, the library. Yeah, except I can't read very fast. I need to take my time to read. And going to the library, you have to pay. Or you have to have transportation, which isn't actually free. And that's a whole other story. That and trying to survive, which has never actually gone back to, no one is, the whole middle class has been destroyed. So whatever. Monad. Let's talk about monad. I saw, this guy was talking, and it was supposed to be like this continuing series of talks, and where this guy is talking about something. And it was like that sort of Gnostic, Hermetic, Kabbalah, I don't know, it was a mix of stuff. This guy started talking, and this is another mistake I made when I was younger, is that sometimes when somebody acts like they know what they're talking about, and you just believe them, that's, you've been tricked. A lot, just because somebody acts like they know what they're talking about doesn't mean they do. And another one is just because somebody published and wrote a book doesn't mean that they're the expert or they even know what they're talking about. That's a thing. Oh my God, there's so many books that I read back then that gave me a very wrong, limited impression of whatever, only to find out later on in life, reflecting back on that and going, oh my God, this is so wrong. Why did they write this? Because they didn't know anything. They didn't know what they were talking about. It was a cash grab or a, I'm so awesome, look at me, grandiosity, like vainglorious crap. Because, you know, that's apparently what people want you to think so-called spirituality is. And this gets into, like, because Chrisanne Moore, she mentions the pre-Socratics. And it's funny because, like, nobody really talks that much about the pre-Socratics. So much of the verbiage and the concepts that you think you know, and this is the awesome thing about philosophy, because a lot of people, there's so many words that we use that don't actually mean what they're supposed to mean, like symposium, which also is a book by Aristotle about Socrates. It's one of the books that nobody usually talks about for certain kinds of inappropriate topics with minors. I'm just saying that's a subject that comes up in that book. I would know I read it. Speaking of stereotypes, there are stereotypes about Greeks. Okay, there are stereotypes about Greeks. That's another topic. So the monad, and this guy is talking, and what's he saying? He's talking about the difference between a spirit. Well, he's talking about how there's a difference between a spirit and a soul. And when I heard that, it was like a computer malfunctioning, like, what? Huh? What? Aren't they the same thing? No, apparently not. So he's talking about it. He's not explaining anything. And I'm like, what is this? What is this? There's different things. And he's talking about a monad and whatever. And then I think there was some other guy in the lecture who mentioned some other things. And then they just started talking about something else. And none of the other podcasts said anything on this. And then he never made any more podcasts. And I was just like, what is this? What does this mean? There's a difference between a spirit and a soul? They're not the same thing? Like, what is that? And what does that mean? And I'm not talking like spirits like alcohol. I'm talking like, no, they're a different concept. And then he's talking about a monad, and I'm like, what the hell is that? What the hell is that? So I go to the search engines, and I'm even typing even in the podcast, in iTunes, monad. Nothing comes up. Gee, I'm not surprised. And then I go to the search engines, and there's like nothing. And I'm just like, and this was like in the Bush era. And I'm just dumbfounded. Like, what is this? What is that? I think I probably even wrote about it in my journals and my blogs and stuff. Like, what the heck? What does this mean? And nobody knows it. I don't know. So then as time goes by, here, let's see what happens if you type it here, monad. I wanted to know what this was. I wanted to understand what this was. And I know I brought up the pre-Socratics, right? it's funny how many these certain things come up. Notice how there's no like, now there's a Coinbase. All right, let's see what happens. Just go to Google and just see what comes up. Because I don't know, Google is like popular. I would not say it's good. Yeah, see, there's all these interesting. So here we go, philosophy. Now this page has changed so many times. It's funny how it's still kind of short actually. It's filled in a little bit, right? Here we go. This is one kind of a concept of a monad, right? One of the things I found you're really trying to understand and grapple with what the hell a monad is, you will find that you can never actually definitively narrow that down at all. Because I found that oftentimes when I would look into this, every source that I would find would have a completely different definition of what that was. They also never cited their source, and it was if whoever was writing it was just copying it off of some other source, didn't actually understand it either, and just wrote down either verbatim what they read, or if it was a longer concept, they just sort of condensed it, and they're like, yeah, that sounds good enough, just put it there. Right? Then there's things like Leibniz, right? See if it comes. Yeah, Leibniz, which was another concept. Here we go. Monad with Leibniz. Completely different subject. And then to buy the book, you had to go to these websites that would sell old used textbooks, and they were like over $300, $400, $500. They're also, so then when I tried to look up courses like what schools are teaching this, there weren't any. There weren't any. Everybody who talks about this concept of a monad all have a very different version, a very different concept, very different view of whatever a monad is. So I ask, what is a monad? Then we get into another monad, and there's several, okay? Alright, monad, if I can even find this, let me see. Class, see if I can even find it. There is a mathematical equation or style of math. There he is, here it is. This girl, this is 18 years ago. 18 years ago, this British chick. Alright, let's just real quick.
Today we're going to talk about monads. Monads are a nice abstract way of talking about various algebraic theories. You can use monads to describe the theory of groups, for example, the theory of monoids, the theory of categories, the theory of various things. And monads give us a way of talking about all those things. And understanding in a minute.
There are several of these. Okay. If you go on to here, and she does these calculations, and I was so fixated on whatever this was, and I was like, what is this? What does this mean? What the heck? What does this mean? I would obsess about this for years. It's so funny because it's like we're literally in Mercury retrograde right now, and for whatever reason, oftentimes when it was Mercury retrograde, I'd be like, don't think about it, don't look at it, and then I'd be like, I'll just really quick, it's not gonna hurt. And I would give myself actual migraines, actual extremely painful migraines in my eyeballs, in my head, in my neck, in my ears, in my teeth, in my guts. So I would be so sick from trying to figure it out, trying to wrap my head around whatever this is. And trying to understand this British chick talking about monads and monoids. And being like, what is this? Throughout my life, if I ever came across somebody who was a mathematician, I would get so fucking excited being like, please, can you tell me, can you explain to me what this is? What are these monads? What are these calculations? What do they mean? What is this for? And every single person was like, I don't know. What? Including professors! Including professors! So the question stands, what is a monad? At some point, because these things forced me to learn other things and connect to these things and whatever, I have a whole lifetime of thinking and pondering and researching and reflecting and digesting and whatever. And then at some point, so she has adjunctions and adjunctions for, etc. She's going through all of this stuff.
At the end of adjunctions too.
And then I start to realize, oh, this is programming. This is programming language. It dawned on me like a year or two ago. I was like, oh, this is programming. That's what this is. That's what this is. The fact that this exists, the fact that somebody came up with this, by the way, she also talks about how there's certain formulas of these that she can only do with certain numbers, blows my mind. So you can do it easily within these certain numbers, but only those numbers. And then the other numbers you can't do. And this chick is really smart. She also has a very interesting personality.
I promised to prove that the two definitions we'd given of an adjunction were both the same. And then I manifestly chickened out of actually doing it.
So there's the nerd humor right there. So monad. I would say a lot of these things have a tendency to be a model and a framework for viewing and conceptualize certain aspects of this reality or reality, the concept of reality overall. And so when we get into, like, where was it? Monad. Where was the wiki? It was here, wasn't it? It's not even here. There we go. And do you see all these different categories going on? More results. Here we go. Monad Gnosticism, category theory. Monad philosophy, functional programming. It's funny how you have it there now. You have it there now as saying functional programming, but not before. Not like decades before. These are ways of conceptualizing. Well, here's just a list of stuff. Monism. Here we go. Monism, monad, theism. Greek. Here's the Greek. I actually am studying Greek, which I'm not amazing at. And don't ask me in case I'm just still figuring it out. I'm still figuring out the grammar and structure in modern Greek, contemporary Greek. Dual aspect of monism. Neutral monism. And this is one of those things that we could talk and talk and talk and still not quite get there. Much like absolute zero. Absolute zero. It's funny because like this gets into like positive and negative and we have like the whole yin yang. It's funny because like people understand that this is a concept, right? They understand that this is a concept. Negative, positive. And yet there are people who are still stuck in this very Western biased good versus bad, when that's actually not the real, that's not the actual thing. It's like honestly very juvenile. Good versus bad. So is female bad? Because that's the yin. That's female. And this, the white, is the male. Am I evil? Am I evil? People who, there's another one. Dao De Jing. Dao De Jing. And you can't just read one version, because especially in English. You need various translations, because there's a lot of meaning that is lost, and you need different perspectives of it. How many people, like, okay, so some of these are kind of long, actually. Where is it? Let's do audiobook. This one is over an hour. This one's over an hour. By the way, I'm pronouncing it the Mandarin way, Dao De Jing. Here we go, this one. This one, and there's like the Wayne Dyer version. These are people coming at it from different perspectives, trying to help you to understand a certain concept. However, I must say that in Chinese it's different. It is because there's a whole written aspect. Here we go. That just doesn't happen in English. Let's see what we got. They didn't show the... They are showing some of the characters. There's a guy really explaining all of it. It's very... If I could just show it the way it's written in Chinese. Here we go, it's right here. Dao, ke dao, fei chang dao. It's a very different experience in Chinese. Probably because there's a whole other way of looking at things. It's hard to even comprehend what I mean, what I'm getting at, if you only have one language. If you only have one way of thinking, especially and you only have one language. And if you can't speak more than one language, you've elected to limit yourself. And I'm not saying this to shame or mock anybody, but that is a thing. That is a real thing. There's a saying, lost in translation, and that is a very real experience. There are honestly things concepts and ways of speaking in other languages that we don't have in other languages. Like even just in German, the way that they talk, the way they speak about like words like love, it's very different than here. It is different. Some I like better their way, and others I like it better our way. You know? Same thing in Chinese. So, monad. What is a monad? Well, you'd have to actually do the work and try to see what you can find, because one source is not enough and it's not good enough. And I just brought up Chrisanne Moore. Inadequate answers. Inadequate answers. Some answers are better than others. When you actually understand how a lot of things are never fully true or fully definitive, when you actually comprehend this shatters a lot of the things you take for granted, like this concept you think of as history, things that you take for granted, you and so on. But also, when you actually wake the fuck up and start to think, things like instant gratification lose its meaning. Things like dopamine hits and like these things just lose their luster and they lose their interest. You start to have this yen for authentic things, real understandings, and you can kind of tell when people like are diverted in the wrong way, or they're asleep at the wheel, or it's like just nobody home, right? I don't know what it is about me, and it can be a good and bad experience. Something about me seems to just shunt people. It sort of jostles people, which they might not like because maybe they were happier while they were asleep at the wheel and just going along with the script of life. And then other people, I guess whatever they get out of me makes them feel something that they don't feel otherwise. Like, I treat them like a person. I treat them like a human being. I don't treat them like a disease. Even if they're a criminal. Even if they're some hideous looking whatever. But I'm talking to them like a person. I'm talking to them because they are a person. There are times when people fucking glom onto me, and it's like this weird feeding frenzy, or this weird obsession where they want to, it's like, give me that hit, give me that. This is the thing though, like, you don't need validation from other people. Okay? You could find it in yourself. Okay? As far as like really trying to come to a full conclusion about whatever monad is, it's just a thing you just always need to ponder and question, because I find that even this page itself can change all the time, being rewritten. So you might have absorbed whatever you think it told you, and then 10 years from now, or even 4 years from now, come back again because you're talking based on a framework of what you digested and you wrote down, maybe wrote an essay about. Come back to the same page, and now it's not even saying what it told you to think and believe 4 years ago or whatever. Same thing with like even like the page of like ethics. Let's see if it has it. Ethics, philosophy. Is it? Did it? Philanthropy? No. So, B. See, it's funny because they put in morality. The word morality, this is fun because Chrisanne Moore, when she talks in her videos, she'll talk about ethics versus morality. She uses morality to mean like, is it a good thing or a bad thing, kind of a thing. Whereas ethics there's different versions of them, which she does know. The word moral actually does mean rules. I'm pretty sure it's Latin. Right? Here we go. Types of ethics. Utilitarianism. Oh, this has definitely been edited again. Deontology. So we don't have the top ones. We have virtue ethics, right? They have completely redone this page. Oh my god. I shouldn't be shocked, but I feel shocked again. I feel very because you know what? We don't want people to know the origins of the ethics, the origins of what philosophy actually was originally for. Philosophy was intended to help you live the good life. What is good? What does it mean to be good? What is goodness? What is bad? Wow, they didn't even bring up like hedonism, and hedonism is an ethics. Is a type of ethics. Let me just type in. This is freaking sucks. Here we go. There were several of these branches of ethics, and hedonism was considered an ethic. It was one of the most popular ones. So you go ethical hedonism, because we have to recategorize and relabel everything over and over and over, and just kind of compartmentalize it as far away from things as digestible to regular humans, even though this isn't hard. This is not hard. So motivation, pleasure, value, morality. Hedonism was considered, especially in ancient Greece, a very good way of approaching things, because your motive was always to enhance like the pleasure and the good something or whatever. This led to bad experiences, because in this reality there isn't good. Is tiny. Anything good, anything that feels good, anything that is good, it's fleeting, it doesn't last. But all the pain and suffering is massive and blown way out of proportion, right? Even like you get a paper cut, it hurts like hell. It's painful. It's so bad, right? So you're motivated by pleasure. You start getting like things like gluttony, things like lethargy, alcoholism, addiction, and then it sort of goes way overboard. Like like all the world government leaders are it's just sick. This bizarre, hedonistic, overdue, like Marcus Aurelius. So then you get into Stoicism. Stoicism is also not good. It is not good. I just reject Stoicism so much. Stoicism is popular with people who have a self-control problem, who have an impulse control problem. If you've ever read Marcus Aurelius, he's wrote it as his own personal like memoirs and stuff. He never intended it to like go public and be like a movement or whatever. Also, he didn't invent Stoicism. He was trying to come back to a balance because he was in charge of a nation, of an empire. And he had problems. And he would write in his notes congratulating himself. Yay me! I didn't rape 5 boys today. Or animals. Yay me! Congratulations to me. And the fact that the Puritans looked at this and they were like, see, this is the thing we need. Yeah, because you probably are the ones that had that kind of an impulse problem. Funny how I don't have that problem. I don't have that problem. The problem, another major problem with Stoicism is how it's just, you've demonized just regular good feeling emotions. Like, actually sexuality itself is not a bad thing, right? Or dancing, singing, having a nice bit of clothing to wear, or reading a fantasy book, novel, whatever, right? There's all these like broskies online, especially during like the pandemic, just bandwagoning this whole champion of yay, Stoicism. I'm gonna go and get buff and brag about my Stoicism. And they pay for courses and whatever just to have some weird warped view of what Stoicism is without actually understanding where it came from. And this goes back to the pre-Socratics, because I have my notes here. And I know there's a lot of people, because people bring up like, Gnosticism or whatever, and they'll bring up words like spirit, words like soul, words like, what was the other one? Spirit, soul. We just mentioned monad. Oh, I know. Nous. So, it's funny how everything is just sort of chalked up to the Gnostics. The Gnostics studied all things. They were open to all of these things. Although I find that there is a tendency, because it's very Western, European-centric versions of all of this, that it's this certain tunnel vision of whatever. And there's other things outside of it, so we're not going to consider it Gnostic. But if you're Gnostic, you should be open to those other things, though, because that's Gnosticism. I'm just saying. Okay? Which comes to, and this might be part of why I still have very much like to. I know I'm in touch with all kinds of fringe people lately. Because like the world we live in today is just sick. I can't stand the news. I used to be like a news junkie. I can't watch that. The news isn't news. It's stupid. It's dumb. I have better coverage of news watching comedians intentionally acting like goofy, and that's more coherent. Whereas watching what's supposed to be the news, and they're just literally just childish, ridiculous idiots or crazy people, and they're supposed to be like educated or spiritual or whatever, and they just seem like morons. So, actually, I wrote that wrong. Here we go. Enter the pre-Socratics. So before Socrates, and I'm gonna bring it up again and again. Chris Ann Moore, Philosophy 101. Philosophy 101. Because she does actually mention the pre-Socratics. And she also mentions the sophists, or the sophists, same frickin' thing. It's also the origin of the word sophisticated. Which, by the way, I don't know why today people who are philosophers, because I majored in philosophy at UMass Boston, and they are such snobs to you if you're an artist. And when I was doing art over there, they were snobs to me if I did philosophy, and it would be like, ew. Whereas in ancient times, they were into both arts and academics. So we get into the pre-Socratics, which oftentimes were sophists. This is before philosophy, before philosophers, because that's before Socrates. Socrates is the father of philosophy. So we get into this amazing period of history that is never taught in public school. I don't even think it's taught very much at all, like I feel it should be taught in college. And here we go. Nous. So these people, and these are also, the pre-Socratics are the people who came up with the concept of spirit. The word spirit means to inhale air. And because they were oftentimes obsessed with trying to understand what's going on in the world and the world reality and what's going on and what does it mean, and these glorified concepts of the cosmos, they noticed that when things were alive, they would breathe. And then there was also this kind of differing views on, we can even get into like Pythagoras and India and all that stuff. I'm not gonna though. Like this concept of the sky god or the ether, which is funny because ether can also mean, like, ironically, spirits, like alcohol, ether. So they thought that what made something alive was that it had air in it, and that spirits were air. This is also why everybody liked incense. And so this guy here, Anaxagoras, and this for me has a big personal connection in a very personal way, in a way that I don't even know if I want to even talk about publicly on the internet, because I have a connection to this person in a big way, which is probably also why I have a tendency to view the earth as round. It's just, to me, it just seems round to me, based on the things that I do, my stuff systems I work in, and so on and so forth. To me, I have a tendency to just see the earth as round. Okay? He was one of these people, one of the great teachers, and this is before Socrates. See? Pre-Socratic. And yet he's still considered a Greek philosopher. Before there was this term. There's a lot of this weirdness in everything we do, including like how we do dates and time, the timeline. We have AC and BC and BCE and CE and whatever. And it's in reverse. Just like the number line. It's kind of this weird. And so, this guy is the origin of the concept of Nous, not the Gnostics. Because anyone who's telling you that is either A, a liar, or B, ignorant, and they don't know any better. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. And, this is one of those things that this guy, and this happened before Socrates. So many things that influence who we are, human culture around the entire globe, come from this time period, this specific time period, because this was during when Pericles was in charge, who is another figure I have a very personal connection to in a big fucking way, as well as Phidias. The fact that we're supposed to be living in a democracy, the way that the arts and culture is today, comes from the origins of this time period and these specific persons that lived on this planet. This guy Here we go. Responding to claims of Parmenides on the possibility of change, Anaxagoras introduced the concept of Nous, the cosmic mind. Which is interesting because in Heather's video, she's also, you know, pondering this, and she's been working on this for a very long time. As an ordering force. He also gave several novel scientific accounts of natural phenomena, plural, including the notion of panspermia. This guy lived when? That life exists throughout the universe and could be distributed everywhere. He deduced a correct explanation for the eclipses as described the sun as a fiery mass larger than the Peloponnese, and also attempted to explain rainbows and meteors. He also speculated that the sun might just be another star. What happened to this guy? He was banished. Can't have people thinking independent ideas or rational ideas. This was before Socrates, and Socrates was sentenced to death for corrupting the youth's minds by teaching them logic. Again, this fucking page right here, if you haven't watched it, I don't respect you. Watch it right now. All of the answers to your problems, all of the explanations to everything that you're like, why is this world screwed up? What is wrong? Why is everything going wrong? Another one, Jing. Again and again and again and again. But you don't do anything about it. I'm not poking at Heather. Heather's awesome. Heather is awesome in my book. Assuming I have a book. He died of starvation. This was a period of history that nobody talks about. Nobody talks about, and I mean, these people all like knew each other. Pericles, Phidias, the way that a city looks, and I mean, Washington, D.C., is based on people. Like a lot of these texts, these writings, these information, these sciences, what today we would consider sciences, mathematics, was deleted out of our culture by religious zealots. And they murdered the last teacher of the Library of Alexandria in Egypt, which was Hypatia, who was a female. Okay? Nobody knows about that. Nobody knows about that. If you understood these things, you would understand why the founding fathers did what they did and why they did things. Why things were set up a certain way. Why things are falling apart. Things like Brexit and the weirdness of elections and all of these things. And you would just have, you wouldn't be able to be gaslit or duped anymore. You would understand things. There are so many things that you don't understand, and I'm always working on this. I'm always working at this. This is what I really appreciate about Heather. She's always working on these things. She's always tweaking her current understanding of stuff. She is brilliant. Brilliant. You don't have to be brilliant, but you could at least try and learn some stuff. I'm just so tired. It's like the Tao Te Ching, the story, the origin story of that book, Tao Te Ching, was this guy Lao Tzu, or Lao Tzu, which, by the way, that's not his real name. That just means like old guy or old fogey. His real name was like Lee, I think, something like that. He was so fed up with trying to like help people learn stuff, to help people, because they were like, "You're so wise, you know all these things," da da da. And then he'd tell them and teach them, and they just wouldn't take his teachings to heart or do anything. So he just gets so fed up that in the story he hopped on the back of his ox, which apparently was his buddy, and he starts leaving the city. And he's like, "I'm leaving forever. Goodbye. I'm gonna go live in the wilderness like a hermit." And the guards ironically, of all the people, it's the brute guards who guarded the city that were like, "No, you can't go, you're brilliant, you have to leave something behind for us to, to work with." And so the story goes, he sat down and he penned Jing, gave it to the guards, and was like, "Bye." And then he went off to live in the wilderness because he was just very, what's the word? Misanthropic or fed up with human beings at that point. And he'd rather live out in the wilderness as a hermit in the cold because he was fed up with society. I know the feeling. I know this feeling. Now, I don't know that I think that that's a literal story, because there's a lot of symbolism in that story. I figure you couldn't just sit down and write a book like that, like just in one sitting, I figure. because when you look at the actual text here, let me see. The Jing in Chinese text. See if I can find it. And nothing. Chapter 1, here we go. So this is over a lot of people's heads, assuming this will even load. Chinese is very hard. If it ever wants to freaking load. Are you gonna load? Are you gonna load? It's very beautiful. Which one is this? Paragraph 20. Okay, so this right here, this is word for Dao. If you actually look at the character, you can actually see how it kind of looks like a guy just sitting in a lounge, he's in a seat. That's the word Dao. Well, that's a very artistic. Here we go. See this? It looks like a little guy here, and he's kind of sitting in this thing. There's a lot of meaning in the way the words are put together. Here we go. Here we go. Dao ke Dao. Fei chang Dao. Ming ke Ming. Fei chang Ming. These things are different than how it's usually spoken in English. In English, it usually goes something like, the Tao that can be named is not the way, kind of thing. This is because this is classical Chinese. This is a Vanyavan. This is going to sound like I'm a nerd now. Vanyavan. Here we get into 诵读之声, the sound of reading. We get into idioms. A lot of things, this stuff just doesn't translate very well over to English. I feel like people in the Far East, like Japan, Korea, Thailand, or whatever, they can kind of perceive these things. It's just like, I think, like, my name in Chinese, makes sense in this classical Chinese way. Of the human cultures that have the greatest stuff, and it's funny because it's also, it mentions Persia here. That's another one. I think the two best human languages, human achievements in language, culture, arts, Chinese and Greek are the best. I also feel that Persian, ancient Persian especially, has a lot of these qualities as well. There is a lot to that. There's a lot to be said about that, but I don't know as much about Persian stuff as I would like to. Not that I don't know anything, but I'm always learning. So, what is a monad? What is a monad? Oftentimes it has these depictions of spheres and circles, and then we get into like soul and spirit. Well, soul and spirit, sometimes we get into these sort of Gnostic, and because why there's no, it's not definitive. I don't think anyone actually really knows. These are just sort of trying to grapple with stuff. Because if you get in Leibniz, it's like these mirror spheres. But in that ancient view, a lot of times you have these kind of sphere circle concepts. And so when you get into the, I guess, Gnostics or Hermetics or whatever, they'll talk about like a spirit and a soul as two different things and lop it in with monad, which not sure that I agree. Also, no rationale for that. It's just, let's just slap it together and there's a concept. Maybe. But spirit, and this is one of these things, like, I remember when this was in the 20 teens, and I started looking into the pre-Socratics and everything, like Anaxagoras. And they came up with concepts today, like the word spirit, this concept. Also, things like prayer, very ancient times, prehistoric or whatever, was not always thoughts in your head. It was ritual things you did. Right? And it's changed many times over time. So we have this concept of spirit being air. So when it dies and it's not breathing anymore, it can't inhale, the breath has left it. And that was the literal definitive meaning of spirit, was air, as well as why they used incense, smoke, fire, why sky deities became the thing. And that also gets into another thing that no one freaking talks about, is Tengrism, which was probably why a lot of people gravitated to the monotheistic thing, because your ancient ancestors, this was the loving God, the one God that looked over you, and it was above everyone. And even though its element is air, which seems to be weak, it's so big and so vast, and it's over top of you. This one, to me, is one of my favorite things to look into, because the stuff that's available in English is not a lot. It's been updated. It gets into like ancient Turkic and Mongolian culture, with it's hard to know which one ends and one begins, and one, it's just mashed. This is what your ancestors actually did. They weren't in the Middle East. They were in Eurasia. I don't know if you can tell I've watched a lot of these videos. Some of these videos I've probably watched many times over. It never ends. It never ends, because it's funny, because like I mentioned Dao de Jing, those who know, those who think they know don't really know, those who say they know don't really know, and those who think they don't know probably know a lot more. It's very Socratic even, right? It's very Socratic. I'm never satisfied, and it's kind of like that with art too. Like, I'd go places like when I was younger, and I'd go to like these conventions, and people like freak out when I'd show up, like, oh my god, it's you. I'm like, I thought we were cool, like I thought we talked all the time on fucking blogs and, you know, whatever, and people freaking out because I'm there. And it's like, yeah, but I figure you could probably do what I do, though, right? In arts or whatever. So then we get into this concept of the soul, and this is very much in the pre-Socratics as well as the Greek philosophers themselves. They had this concept of this non-physical self, like who are you, what is you? And they also get into things like beauty, what is beauty? So like the Symposium talks about this with Socrates having inner beauty despite him being ugly on the outside, although I don't necessarily think he was ugly, just whatever cultural ideals of beauty. Like, for example, like Pericles was considered ugly, which I'm just very shocked. This guy was in charge. This guy was in charge. This guy was a huge leader. He was also oftentimes, and this was the same period. Everybody knew each other. This was Athens. Small world. Small world. Huge, big, nice city, but not a huge population. Especially by our standards today. This guy was considered ugly. He looks hot. I don't know. He looks really good. He put this helmet on his head because he had a odd-shaped skull because of some injury when he was born or whatever. So his head was shaped strange like a squid or whatever. Is this gonna work? Would you like to work, please? Would you like to do your job for me? This guy is considered ugly? That's an ugly guy? I don't get it. He looks hot. He looks really good. Probably because the things that they thought was beautiful was stuff like, well, what you usually think of as a philosopher. Like, here we go. Let's see. Well, Socrates. I don't know. So they also felt that an elderly face was beautiful. So that he was considered ugly. But yet every time they try to make someone seem a certain way, they would try and make them look like Socrates. I don't know that's ugly. He just looks like a interesting old guy with a lot of interesting stuff on his mind. The imagery of him is very consistent. Although these are AIs, though. Here we go. We've made him into a muscular, almost Zeus-like person here. Because art doesn't look bad to me. No, the thing is, if you've read the Symposium, there were all these men that were super interested in them because basically ancient Greeks were bisexual. That's a thing. That's not me making up anything. That's a thing. Their culture is bisexual. They were not interested so much as in women in the ways that you would think usually. Not that they didn't like women, they did. The word slut is basically a woman you keep in your house to clean your house and do chores and things. And they were not interested in sluts. They were interested in each other because they were brilliant. And their sluts were just eye candy in the house to clean the house and stuff. That was their culture. They had a mix of good and bad, just like we do. We have a mix of good and bad. There's no perfect society. There's no perfect culture, including our own. Even our own culture had slaves. And the Greeks, I feel, were probably one of the first cultures that was examining things like slaves, and this gets into there was many kinds of philosophy, or even, like I said, ethics, right? My personal favorite, love it, was the Cynics. This was one of the ethics. I like Cynics and Cynicism way more than Stoicism. It's this concept of, this is where the things that we use words for to mean have lost their meaning over time. So Cynicism, oftentimes when I would look into it, and it changes all the time, so if I'm saying something that seems outdated or whatever, it's because I was reading it from various sources over time, but basically it goes like this. It's funny because usually it's not written here anymore. They don't necessarily make any mention of it that much anymore. So this concept of a virtue and a vice. A virtue meaning a good trait of a human being, and a vice is a bad trait. And this is not like sin, and that's another topic I could get into, because that has been changed over time as well. So, as a cynic, in ethics, in philosophy, as a cynic, what you would want to do is to identify what your virtues are, and also try to enhance them, as well as your vices. And you would need to know what your vices are. Basic stuff, lying, cheating, deception in a bad way, murder, greed, jealousy. And you would need to figure out, what are your vices? What do you need to work on? Are you lazy? That's another one. Are you lazy? Are you, do you lack patience? Are you impatient? And you want to find out what your vices are, and then you work on them. It could be even like addictions or something, right? And then you want to maximize and increase the amount of virtues you have, which is a good thing. So are you kind to others? Are you generous? Do you have goodwill towards others? Do you have charity? These are things that are good things. Are you helpful? And you would like to either flip and change or work on and improve your vices and turn it into a virtue, and hopefully delete and eliminate your vices to become better than you were before, to strive, and of your virtues and your skills, to hone those things, to increase those things, and to improve those things. If you've ever watched Star Trek has this quality to it. Okay? One of my favorite cynics of all is this really gross philosopher who was a student of Socrates, Diogenes. He's fascinatingly interesting, super amazing. He was like this counterculture guy, and his life was horrible. He went through probably some of the worst things a human being could have to go through. When he was a kid, his father was some kind of like elite in the financial industry, and then it collapsed, and he went from this privileged wealth to extreme poverty. Then he was kidnapped and turned into a slave, and he had the best teachers. He was very knowledgeable, and he was a student of Socrates himself. So as he was put through this brutal slavery, and I believe he was sold a few times, they would always realize that he was very smart. He was very educated, to the point where his masters would make him tutor their children. And so he started tutoring generations of people, their friends, their neighbors, or associates, classes of people. And then at some point, because he's so good at teaching ethics and philosophy, it became apparent that it was wrong to keep this guy as a slave. So he was freed. And then eventually he went back to, I believe, Athens. And rather than becoming another cog in the wheel of consumerism, he intentionally, on purpose, much like how Socrates was. Now, Socrates had a house to live in and a wife. Socrates would go around and he would just wear like his robes, his mantle, and he's just I'm just wearing whatever I feel like it. I don't need to be pretty. I don't need all these trappings and these accoutrements, whatever. I'm just gonna hang around with some dogs and talk to people. And he would talk to all kinds of people. He would talk to what society considered rejects and stupid, and people who were diseased, and he would also talk to intellectuals and professors and whatever, and all the people who had a lot of things, a lot of wealth or a lot of status, hated his guts because he'd prove how stupid they were and how shallow they were, even by not trying. And he was very much an advocate of the people. So Diogenes was like that, but he would go many more steps into the absurd on purpose. And he was just trolling everything. He was a very charismatic person. He was very much like hippies back in the day in the 60s, where he'd have an entourage of people who just wanted to be around him because he was super funny and super cool. He was like George Carlin in a way. And people would like, rich kids would, just like hippies in the 60s, they'd spend a weekend or a week hanging out with him in the road, just pretending to be homeless, because he was so awesome and they just wanted to be like him so bad. But he did really gross things, like he would take a dump in public, and he had dogs around him. There's so many stories about this guy. And in the tarot, the hermit is Diogenes. See the lantern? I love lanterns. It's in a lot of my work, a lot of my artwork. I have lanterns. He did a lot of this kind of like comedy performance art things where he had a lantern and he's walking around with this lantern even in the daytime. And people are like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm looking for a good man, or I'm looking for an honest man. It's a kind of performance art. See, there he is with the dogs. He was also said to have lived in a giant jar. There's other stories of Alexander the Great. I don't know if it's actually true. It might just be a story. Wanted to meet him and offered him a job. And he was like, what do you need? What do you want? And he's like, I'll tell you what I want. He's like, what? Can you just move out of the way? You're blocking my sunlight. So, mind versus brain, spirit versus soul. It's funny because Heather also mentioned Anthony Peake. I watch Anthony Peake. I love Anthony Peake. Spirit versus soul. Soul, especially in ancient Greek, is the word psyche. I feel like today we use this to mean the mind, especially like we get into like Freudian stuff. Psyche means the soul, but it was also a goddess or a nymph. Eros and Psyche. Eros is also Cupid. It's also a style of another word for lust. And soul. I've contemplated so many things from so many different points of view, and I oftentimes didn't always want to use the word soul. Sometimes they use words like essence, which also has like this air kind of quality, that's air, essence of codfish, essence of parfum, soul. I feel like the arguments of the philosophers, ancient philosophers, including even like pre-Socratics and sophists and stuff, which, by the way, usually the connotation of a sophist is a bad thing. Before it wasn't when they first started, but as many things become corrupted, it's kind of like Grima Wormtongue in The Lord of the Rings is definitely a sophist. Sophists used especially things like rhetoric. Rhetoric is not a good thing necessarily. It's dangerous. And a lot of propaganda is straight up rhetoric. I never say the word rhetoric because it's stupid. It's rhetoric. Not rhetoric. Sound like freaking John McCain. Rhetoric. Like white trash. Very white trashy. So soul. It's like this non-physical component of something, like who am I, who are you, who are we. And when you test this a lot, when you argue and counter-argue, if you've understood the Socratic method, otherwise known as logic and reasoning, rational thought, you start to come to the point of this concept of what it is. What is a soul? Do I have a soul? I've also come to this very jarring experience many times, and I know NPCs triggering some people because, like, I know Mark from Forever Conscious, like, he hates it. He hates ending Howdy McCoskey. Hate using this. A lot of people hate it. NPC, non-player character. It's like a concept of video games. These background characters that aren't real people, and they just are just on a loop. If you had come to me with this concept like 20 years ago, I would have rejected it. I'd be like, that's stupid, that's silly. And then I had a very real experience. Actually, let me see if I can even find that video. Where I hope I don't come off as Karen in this fucking video. If I can even find it. Oops. Let me save it. Oh, there it is. My ex-employer's JC Pennies shut down. Let's see. I apologize if I come off as a fucking Karen in this video. I hope it's not too bad. But I felt like I had to say something at the time because it was just the shit that happened to me. I needed to just vent it. Okay, so I'm right now at, this is the exit or entrance, which is also used as the employee exit only entrance at closing. It is now closed. It is closed down. I worked here in, 2012 or 2013, and we were oftentimes forced to clock out, and we were locked inside the building without permission to leave, based on whose authority, I have no idea, which is also illegal, and oftentimes expected to clean up or have meetings, which is totally illegal. And the new hotshot boss at the time, who thought she was awesome, she thought she was going to be like a millionaire or something. She wanted to break the law and force everybody to work on Thanksgiving, which is against the law. It's also considered really taboo in the United States to force people to work on a holiday like that. And this is where it is. It is now shut down. It is closed. I could go on and on about the terrible and unethical business practices that did go on, and I don't blame everybody because there's a power dynamic and so on going on with that. But I did work there, and I can tell you I was in a lot of pain when I worked there. Nobody cared. There was other people who were disabled who worked there, and I did argue with people because I would stand up for certain things because I knew what my rights were, and I know about ethics and things like that. So that's all I have to say about that. Okay, that wasn't that bad. But I had a very real experience there. And this guy very much, and it was so jarring to me. It was absolutely shocked. That was shocking. It was so shocking. It's so jarring, that experience with that guy who worked there. This idea that this guy literally had no soul and he was like a machine. And after you can come to these sort of epiphanies and conclusions about certain people, it's like there's no one inside. It's like they're robotic, like they have no soul, they have no depth, and it's all fake. And I couldn't unsee it. I also could, when I worked there, this experience of observing people, it was like they were just shut asleep. Like they were just going along with emotions and just going through these routines. And the majority of who they actually were inside was fast asleep. And it was like they were just a battery powering their body, like, to move around and do labor because they hated their life. They hated who they were. And they were just like, oh, this is what I think I'm supposed to do because the group mentality says I'm supposed to. I had a very bad experience. Working in general in this world is just a bad experience. I've never had a good job, ever. And the word career has nothing to do whatsoever with a salary, making money, or a paycheck. You can be a monk and that's your career. And monks, for eons, was never about making money or getting a paycheck. Think about that. Look up the definition of career. It does not mean what you think it is, what it does. There's so many things that people think they know that they don't. And this is why I suggest this again. You need to learn these things. You need to know these things. The answers to a lot of why things are, the answers are not only inside of you already, but philosophy will help you with that. The other one is Jing. The other one is Jing. All the hours, so it's now almost 6 o'clock as I'm recording this. Hours have gone by today. What did you do in those hours? What did you do in the hours last night? Yesterday? What did you do with your time? You also, and this is what I would do, like for example, and here's a can of worms. Where is it? So this is the Collapse documentary with Michael Rupert, the late Michael Rupert, about peak oil. Now I know Mark from Forever Consciousness, whatever, they're not so much into the whole we're running out of energy and that kind of thing, which that's an interesting point of view. Like, I do understand these points of view. But if we're going just on, like, numbers, on, like, dirty energy fuel or whatever, do I have this twice? No. This is a thing, it does make sense. This was something I spent a long time researching. So it was this, and the other one is permaculture. I want to recommend also right now, it's the end of November. So if you still don't know what permaculture is, it behooves you to understand these things. Same thing with peak oil. If you watch this movie Collapse, you need to watch this movie. If you don't understand what they're talking about, you can pause it, get a notebook like I did. Anybody can do this. Write it down, and then you can pause it, look it up. Bit by bit by bit. You didn't know anything, now you have this bit, now you have that bit, and it adds up. Then you start to have a bigger picture of things. And you don't have to be an environmentalist like myself to understand these things. Permaculture. And this is one of those things, like, if Jimmy Dore would actually just listen to, so many times where people would pay to do like super chats about permaculture for at least 10 years now, and he still hasn't done anything about it. I love Jimmy Dore, but seriously, Jimmy, like, this is your wheelhouse. Like, this is something you need to do. You need to do. Where is that? Okay, so this guy here. This guy is important. His teacher was the guy who started the whole concept of what is permaculture today. This concept of a food forest. What is permaculture? Where is that documentary with that guy? What was that guy in China? Here it is. John D. Liu. Green Gold. The way your life is organized, the way your society is organized, the way transportation is run, the history of that. If you understood the peak oil thing and you watched that documentary Collapse, this guy here, if you understand permaculture, you need to watch this. You need to watch this because you're fed up with the way the food is. You're fed up with fake food. You're fed up with the dirty energy system, or the energy system. You're fed up with how commerce is, because we don't even economize anymore. You need to know these things. You need to learn these things. And once it doesn't even take that long. Let's just say if it just took you a few days, I don't even think it would take that. Just watch this video right here. This guy, which is also connected to that other guy. What's his name? Oh, he's right there. This guy. Geoff's top 10 garden priorities. The way that nature works, the way that soil systems work, the way that ecology works, the way that the woods, the forest works, it has all these mechanisms that help itself, help each other. Your concept of evolution, where it's like survival of the fittest and it's a cruel world and blah blah blah, isn't a full, real truth of nature. Actually, especially when you understand how permaculture works, how nature works, it actually helps itself. It helps each other. It's a network of harmonizing the root systems of plants, the bacteria, the fungus, all these things. It's like and it's funny because like in Heather's video, she's talking about the cosmic mind. She's talking about, and I mean, I just mentioned Anaxagoras, Nous, right? Mind versus brain. Mind versus brain. Everything that you're doing, all the way that you're living, it's hard to conceive that there are better ways of living if this is the only thing you know. And I don't even have to go the route of the Zeitgeist. Those are some interesting films. Peter Joseph, also an interesting person. Then there's another one. Let's see if I can see if it's on here. No, it's a bit old. This is another one. You must watch this. It's a bit old. Unless they've made a new updated version of it. I think it's worth watching the old version originally, honestly. The word corporation doesn't mean what you think it is, just like the word company doesn't mean what you think it is. These words came from the Roman Empire, which is also the origin of the banking system that we currently use. And it means a military or an army. Corporations themselves as business ventures became this interesting trickety trick of people in the financial sector. And in order to charter a corporation, originally, they couldn't last very long. This idea of your job being in charge of your health care is also, well, especially like in the 1800s and the early 1900s, people who were businessmen were like, well, I don't think making money is bad and evil if I do good things, so I'm going to do these good things. So you have someone like Henry Ford. And I mean, I live here in Weymouth, Massachusetts, where a lot of this stuff was pioneered, the framework of all this stuff started. And they're like, well, see, I'm a good person. I care about my employees, like my family. I'm going to, as part of their salary, I'm going to pay for health insurance. Which, by the way, was not extremely badly priced back then. The cost of going to a doctor was a reasonable cost. Now, there's all these middlemen in between all of that for profits. And it's intentionally kept to not work right, to maximize profits, which, by the way, is also bought and sold and traded in the stock market, which isn't even, it has anything to do with investment at all. It's gambling. So here we are. Here we are on the brink of, I don't know, any day, who knows, World War III, which I feel like has just been going on this entire century, just no one declared it. And I could probably get into a bunch of these other topics, like Heather was getting into, like brain versus mind, and more stuff about the mind. I have so many thoughts and feelings. So brain versus mind, I've always felt that the mind is very different than the brain, and that the brain is itself a construct, like a machine. I've also watched lots of Star Trek, so I think I have a pretty decent working just even from just that without having done any research on it. I did though, lots. It's a thing that interests me. And then even on that note, emotions versus like chemicals, like your feelings, your emotions. Your feelings, because this is a thing that I've heard over and over again, that your feelings, your emotions are just chemicals in your body. I don't agree with that. In fact, I think my younger self had something to say about that. I don't even know how long ago that was. And, yeah, there we go. Me hitting level 72. Speaking of chemicals, do I have it here? No, it's not. It's like forever ago. I had this vlog and I was talking about Descartes because it was just very much still reflecting and digesting on philosophical concepts and like the mind versus the brain, because I don't think they're the same. There's so many things I can say about this, and I have a lot of weird experiences myself in a very real way. And if you've ever watched the movie Clueless from the 90s, I don't know where that video is, but that I made. It's somewhere there. I just don't feel like wasting my time trying to sift through everything. Actually, just do a trailer. It's like a very popular movie in the 90s with Alicia Silverstone. And throughout this story, she's trying to find like this perfect guy or this, whatever, love. And she's also trying to meddle with other people and get them to have their perfect partner or whatever, because she's based on some novel from like the 1800s or whatever. I forget which novel it was. It's a classic literature novel. And she first has a crush on this guy who's a flaming gay guy, and she herself is, the term, I could probably get in trouble if I say it. It was a term back in the 90s called an FAG, hag, which is like girls who like to hang out with gay dudes because they're fun. And she's one of those. I oftentimes can be one of those myself, where I don't know, gay dudes are fun. They're just more interesting. And so she's sort of dating this guy who's flaming gay, and then coming to terms with the fact that he's gay, but also like finding she really likes him as a person and as a friend. And this movie very much is a comedy, but also has like this inner dialogue, diary style to it. And then towards the end of the movie, as various people are finding, like this girl who's Brittany Murphy's character realizes she likes this guy, the skater guy. And then she has this epiphany at the end of the movie that she's in love with this guy, Josh, who was her stepbrother, but now their parents are not married, but they're still family or whatever, and they still hang out and whatever. And she has this epiphany that she's actually in love with Josh. This idea that chemicals are your emotions is stupid, because it's very much, emotions are very much connected to the mind in a big way. It's funny because a lot of times people would refer to it as the psyche, meaning the mind. However, the psyche actually means your soul, right? So if she was in love with this guy the entire time but was in denial over it and didn't understand it, then that's not chemicals. That's something else. There's some other component there that has nothing to do with chemicals. And I also had this kind of experience myself when I was younger. And this concept that love is just chemicals just falls apart. I I kind of think this may also be like why people like this idea. It's a very common romantic trope in storytelling narrative of enemies to lovers, kind of a thing where the passion flips from hate to like eros and deep passionate love or whatever, or this sort of love prevails kind of thing. It's so popular, especially in like literotica, which I also don't think means that it's chemical, because how could you apparently have feelings for somebody for a long extended period of time and not recognize it, not recognize that you're attracted, if it's chemicals, that there's something else going on there. And so there we are with it. Maybe it's more of an experience in the mind. It's also interesting how your feelings are referred to as emotions, meaning motion, meaning movement. That there's a movement. In fact, people will oftentimes say things like they were moved. They were very moved. It was moving. I think there's a lot to be said about that, about how things feel. They have a movement to it. We even have this in music. I personally, when I listen to certain kinds of music that I really like, certain kinds of music that's very like stimulating to me personally, I have a tendency to experience it as though I'm moving. And if you've never studied music, I did. There is this experience of that, but also in music they have something called a movement. I'm gonna just end it here because I think that's enough. There's a lot here. So yeah, Heather's video, Mind at Large. I have a tendency now lately to rewatch a lot of her videos like several times in several parts, just like I do this guy's stuff. I also rewatch a lot of Mark's Forever Consciousness, and even Dan from Overwatch Project. I'll rewatch his stuff a lot too. What I like about Dan's work is he'll even give you like his notes and his stuff and be like, I challenge you to get over your bias and sit through these videos even if you hate them or don't like what their opinions, and try and see what it is I'm trying to show you, and contemplate it, because he's like a detective, like for real. And that's a thing. This guy's content has just, I've been watching his stuff for a long time at this point, for like a good while. How long has this channel been around? I don't even know. I think I started watching it like, I don't even know. It's a thing. I watch his stuff a lot. I like people who have depth, people who have substance, people who have a little thought to put into stuff. And I also value creativeness, this concept of qualia. What is qualia? And I would say qualia is like the taste of chocolate or the smell of a rose, and how it's always different, and there's good and quality and whatever. And this is kind of like another aspect of being an artist, is really understanding qualia and applying your knowledge and your method of working with things to create something new. And it could be anything from like a chef making food, but you're not just making food, it's art with taste and flavor, or fashion, or perfume, or whatever it is. Okay? music. And tastes vary. Tastes can differ. Not everybody is going to appreciate the same thing or experience it the same way. This is kind of getting into qualia. And if you hate art and you hate artists, I urge you to reflect, reassess, and really take notice of what you think you know of art and artists and what that actually means. Everything around you was conceived of by an artist. There's also a difference between an artist and a designer. That's another topic. We have this experience, this horrible reality that we're apparently stuck in, and yet there are things in it. There are things in it. And yet we're ignoring a lot of it. Because why? So you can fit in, or you can seem a certain way to people who don't even care about you. Alright, so I guess I'll just leave that there.